Maybe it's just me. How do Tara?
Hiya, Alan.
Hiya, what can we do for you?
I just wanted to talk to you about the news story we've had this week of Brighton College and them scrapping the gendered uniforms for trans young people. And I think actually Manchester, we should be encouraging our schools to be doing the same, as often Manchester's seen as a bastion for progress. It'd be nice to see our region actually taking a lead and following what Brighton College has done.
I mean, this will sound rude to you, I'm sure, but never mind, I'll cope.
Okay.
How much of an issue do you think it is?
I mean, about 1% of our population is trans, so you're looking at
1%?
1% of the population, so you're looking at about 10 children in every school, which is a small number, but if you look at the harm that some of those children suffer because of the discrimination and the trauma they go through, it's a big issue. So 40% of young trans people will attempt suicide, 80% self-harm. Trying to reduce and tackle those issues is a big job for us.
When I'm walking on ground that I'm not easy with. When I can only ever talk to humans. So when did you know that you wanted to be a different gender than the one you'd been designated?
I knew from the age of 3. I transitioned nearly a decade ago, and I've spoken out quite a lot about my transition and about who I am within the media and within the work that I do. And so it's something that I've always known, and I think the way that society has become more open and talking about trans issues has meant that a lot of young people have felt more confident to be able to come out and talk about being trans and actually not be scared about what people are going to say. So I grew up in an environment where I remember my dad saying to me once, the worst thing I could ever do is to bring a gay black man home and tell him I was gay. So to come out to be trans was just impossible as a young person to think that I was going to do that. And the images that I had about being trans came from TV shows such as Eurotrash, and actually the internet just starting, just being something you could start to access. When I was going to secondary school, we still had Yahoo was the biggest browser way back then. And obviously young people today have got YouTube, you've got the TV documentaries that they've got. They're more aware of actually the feelings they've got and what they are, and that actually they can seek help. And I think it's our responsibility as adults that we're creating an environment where they're wanting to seek help, that help is there, and we're not putting barriers in the way that's going to lead to harm and those people suffering anymore.
Tana, let me be really rude. I don't often get to do this, but let me be really rude. I will come back to you in a moment. Don't put your phone down or anything. I'm just going to be a few seconds. But we've just been given a news story, and they want us to report it. So just stay with me a second. And here's the story. Lancashire police are currently dealing with a man on the roof of a building in Northgate in Blackburn, and the roads around the area have been cordoned off. Now, obviously, we'll keep you informed if and when details come through until 1 o'clock. You'll hear it on BBC Radio Lancashire tomorrow morning, I'm almost sure, with Graham and the like. But Lancashire Police dealing with a man on the roof of a building in Northgate in Blackburn. Now, that's important for them and the man, but for anyone travelling round that area, the roads have been cordoned off. And I don't know whether you'll join me, but I hope that ends peacefully and without harm. Anyway, we'll keep you informed on that if there's any more information, and if not, you will find out on BBC Radio Lancashire's breakfast programme with Graham Liver tomorrow morning. Sorry about that, Tara. I'm back with you.
That's okay.
We started out talking about non-gender specific clothing, and I saw a photograph of it in the newspapers today. So it's trousers, jacket, like a lot of schools do anyway. A lot of girls at school wear trousers now anyway. So
I think
how will that help?
Choice. I think it was saying about choice. And when I work as an equality lead in the NHS, and I work as a freelance diversity consultant, and when I've advised teams on developing uniform policies for organisations, it's saying, why have genders against what's the professional attire for people to come into work? We're saying what the clothing is that we want people to wear. Why do we need to divide that into boxes and say, this is what we expect women to wear and this is what we expect them to wear? Actually, this is what we expect our staff to wear. Because if someone's transitioning and actually they're transsexual, we make an exception and we go, well, that's fine. You've got this special label, so we're going to let you off. But actually, you're still a professional and we'll let you actually wear that uniform. Whereas actually we're saying that we don't really think you look professional, that's why we split it into genders, but we're giving you an exception. So instead of doing that, we're actually just creating an environment where we're saying, this is the expectation for all of our employees. Everybody's an adult, or everybody, in the case of young people going to secondary school, are at a point where they can make choices about their clothing and about who they are. And we trust you to make those choices. And we're not going to enforce, actually, our judgments on how we want to live our lives on you. And I think that's really the message. It's about giving people choice to be themselves, rather than us trying to pigeonhole people into how we want them to live their lives.
But is it not, and I'm going to be gender specific now, is it not the case that if we say we're going to have non-gender specific clothing, then we end up with what most people would describe as male clothing?
They're not saying that the clothing that you have to wear, I mean, I know from Brighton they're saying that there's choices, so people can choose to wear whatever uniform that they want to wear. And that's what the message should be. It's not saying that the only option should be a male or a unisex option. It's saying that actually people should be free to wear whatever. So if
a young girl wants to come into school dressed as a boy, when I say young girl, I'm now back with designated gender.
Use whatever language you feel comfortable with.
Well, it's so we can have the conversation. Really, I feel comfortable with all of it. But a person who's designate female goes to school, she could wear clothing that the boys would wear if, I'm now changing gender, if he chose to. So,
because if you think about what we wear outside of work, I have to wear...
And the reverse. But whilst that might, at school and publicly, give some solace, it wouldn't have worked for you. Remember, I asked you about your background. Your father would have had a dicky fit if you said, well, I don't know which direction you've gone in, Tara, but, well... I can't work out. Which way did you go?
Obviously, I'm Tara, so I was.
Oh, of course. My apologies. Of course. What an idiot.
Okay.
I'm just being a buffoon now.
Don't worry about it.
But I'm just imagining that if that choice was available at your school, it still wouldn't have been available at home.
I think if you looked at where I'd led the conversation, was saying that we've changed and the way that society is now, that actually our young people are more aware of their identities, which is why we've got more young people actually coming forward and wanting to talk about it.
I got that message. I really did, and I'm it's something we ought to be celebrating. However, there is another difficulty, isn't there? Imagine young Tara, whatever your name was before. I'm not asking, but imagine young Albert. Who wants to be Tara. Albert's sitting there and wakes up one morning and says to his parents, from now on I want to go to school in a skirt. Your dad would have gone berserk.
I totally agree. And
so the non-gender specific clothing at your school, or gender choice clothing at school, more accurately, wouldn't have helped you a jot, would it?
The non-gender clothing wouldn't have solved the problem about parents not supporting children who are trans. But if you look at, again, where families are now from where they were 10, 15 years ago, you are seeing more and more parents who've changed their attitudes around trans people, and it's actually the parents saying that they're struggling with schools. I think the last report said there's about 80 schools across the country where they're refusing to support a trans child to be themselves within the schools, and the parents are fighting those schools to be allowed for their child to be able to come into school as who they are, who the parents are affirming that they are, and who the child is affirming that they are. And so we're at that situation where it isn't only the child that's saying that they're trans and that their issue is their family. So in my situation, me being able to come up to my dad, actually we've got children who are fully supported by their parents.
We have, and I've met and interviewed some of those people, and I find them amazing.
Yeah.
But we equally still have an awful lot of people who would be as adamantly not in support as your dad was, and I'm just thinking about the youngster now who's got enough confusion going on, and they think they're coming to some conclusions about their life, and we hope they are. And the conclusion is that I want to be the gender that I'm not being allowed to be at the moment. And the only obstacle, if we have, I'm not arguing against it, but the only obstacle, if we have non-gender specific or gender option clothes, whatever the term is, at schools and elsewhere, it then means that the major barrier is at home, and the fact that there are choices outside surely accentuates the fact that the major barrier is at home. And I wonder about the psychological effect of that reality.
I mean, I think that the issue is that there's two sets of barriers. You're always going to have a barrier at home, and there's always going to be those barriers that are in front of us in society. So I could give you other barriers, such as access to healthcare, and obviously then access to career advice at the end of going to school, and the barriers of getting into employment, or even access as a young person who's trans, travelling around the world, and actually where you can go on holiday. There is lots of barriers that trans people and wider LGBT people face because of the way that our society is made up. But removing one of those barriers is a positive for that young person, and actually it means focus our resources then on actually changing those other issues. So moving towards the home to educate actually families who maybe haven't been as supportive. And actually most of the families that I've ever been involved with who have had a trans child, or even when they've started off more negatively about providing support, most parents love their child, and when you show them the information that your child can lead a happy life if they're supported to be themselves, or actually the risk and the trauma that they're going to suffer if actually they're facing constant barriers and blocks to being able to be themselves, most parents sit there and actually look at it and go, actually, I love my child, and I want my child to lead a really positive life. And you find there are a few people who will turn around and actually refuse to engage on that issue with their child, find it difficult, and actually parents mourn the loss of their child who's transitioned, because they could be losing a daughter or a son.
And gaining t'other, of course.